Hi, Benjamin Jaffe with Eskew Law. We're here talking about self-defense. We've talked about quite a few things related to self-defense and some of the surrounding ideas that you have to be mindful of. I wanted to touch on a couple of more before I finish up. Number one, we talked about this idea of in a self-defense situation, you can't provoke the situation or instigate the situation. But there are a couple of other things that are along those lines that kind of come into play. One of those things is you have to be in a place you have a right to be. And so what that means is you are either on your own property, you are on public property, something like that. You can be on private property and still have ability to defend yourself if you have a right to be there. But let's just say you break into someone's home. Clearly you don't have a right to be there. That's an extreme example. Let's just say you're at someone's house and you're having an argument with them or in their yard and they tell you to leave or you're asked to leave. And then it becomes a situation where you're not leaving and they start to push you away or come at you because you're not leaving their property. That potentially is going to take away your ability to claim self-defense if you are in a place you don't have a right to be because you are now trespassing. And so you have to be mindful of those things. And it goes back to my earlier discussion about kind of doing things the right way or in a way that's going to be able to be evaluated appropriately. So you can't look like you're trying to make the situation worse and expect jurors and or investigators or someone like that to look at you in a favorable way. So if you're asked to leave someone's property, you should do so. If you're someplace that you don't have a right to be in, a situation starts, you probably should remove yourself from that situation. And once you're in a place you have a right to be, you're going to have a right to do what you need to do. But again, that's going to be the type of thing that's going to be assessed later on by other people. Something else that's talked about in regards, I guess in a similar regard, is you cannot be committing a crime and avail yourself of the self-defense claim. Now, that is somewhat, I want to say that's arguable. For example, if you are in possession of marijuana and someone attacks you, you're probably not going to have an issue with defending yourself by any measure. I can't imagine a scenario where it's going to play out in a harmful way for you to be able to defend yourself, even though you're technically committing a crime by possessing marijuana in Indiana. So it's not that sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that would have created a situation where you may have felt like you needed to defend yourself. So extreme example of this is if you're robbing someone with a gun and they take out their gun, you can't shoot them and then claim I was defending myself because they pulled a gun on me. For one, you instigated the situation by, having a gun. But even if you back it off and say you tell someone, give me your wallet, in a threatening manner, that can be considered robbery. The threat of force and trying to take something from another person is robbery in Indiana. So you don't even have to have a gun on you or a weapon of any sort. Just intimidating someone into taking their things is going to be enough. And so if they pulled a gun out, for example, to protect themselves from being robbed, you can't then shoot them or stab them or something and say, oh, I was defending myself because they pulled a gun on me. Well, again, you instigated the situation, but you also were committing an offense against them. And so there have been situations where people who were literally committing a crime have tried to claim later on that they used self-defense when they hurt or injured or killed that other person. And that's just not going to be something that's available to them. Again, the bigger picture is make sure you're doing everything right if you're defending yourself and you're making those choices. That's going to help you quite a bit. So like I said, everything's going to be assessed later on. And so that's sort of my overarching theme, making sure you're doing things the right way. So even though Indiana has really good laws on self-defense, those laws are always going to be evaluated by someone that wasn't in your shoes at that time, even though it's supposed to be considered from the perspective of the person that is, basically using self-defense. It's always going to be through the lens of the person and how they would look at it. So keep those things in mind. If you have to defend yourself, if you're assessing that situation, it's always best to get a lawyer involved and assess the situation if you're charged or you're accused in those situations. I always tell people if you have to defend yourself, and it comes down to an investigation, you probably should say as little as possible other than I felt like this person was going to hurt me, or I was in danger and that's why I did this. Or, make sure you talk to a lawyer before you go talking to the police. Sometimes it's good to talk to the police at that point, as long as you're establishing I felt the need to protect myself. And it's a lot easier to talk about the more justified you were. And I guess going into that, a question that comes up is, how do you defend yourself? It's always helpful if there are witnesses there that would justify or back up your story. The unfortunate thing is, a lot of times this sort of thing happens, there are no witnesses, and it's going to be your word against someone else's, or just your word, and there's a dead body, and the police are assessing that. And so it's a lot easier to talk about. The evidence is going to line up a lot better if you are doing things in the right way. But again, if you can remove yourself from situations, it's going to keep you from being there. Legally, you do not have to try to remove yourself. It's always going to look pretty good, though, if you can. And it's also probably the best way to keep yourself out of harm's way. But again, I do appreciate that these decisions are made instantly and immediately. Unfortunately, that's just where these things are borne out. And I don't have a problem with people protecting themselves. I'm defending those choices oftentimes. But it is a challenge sometimes when outsiders that weren't in the situation are assessing that.